I've been a police officer for 22 years, and over that time, I've experienced being assaulted at work, as a number of my colleagues have as well. Injuries have ranged from very early on in my career. I had my hair pulled. I had very short hair at the time. Hair pulled to the point where they pulled the scalp away from my skull, which has caused permanent nerve end damage just here. Um, Something that you live with on a day-to-day basis. But more recently, so I've been in my current role since July. In the month leading up to my moving roles, I was assaulted twice. I was a custody sergeant at Exeter Police Station, and I was headbutted, which being 6'2" was quite a feat in itself. But I was headbutted, which left me with a concussion, which meant that I had to take some time away from work, mainly because I couldn't speak properly. So that was luckily a short-term issue that I had. But then a couple of weeks later, I was assaulted again by being scratched in the face and having my clothes ripped open as well, which was interesting to my fellow colleagues, having to make myself decent very quickly after that. But it's interesting because I don't wake up on a morning thinking, oh brilliant, have my breakfast, I'm going to go to work and I'm going to come back with an injury because I've been assaulted, which unfortunately does happen to our colleagues, which has a knock-on effect, not only on their ability to perform their role on that day. So for instance, I had to take time off because I couldn't drive, I couldn't speak, but the colleagues who are then backfilling my position, because we haven't got an infinite number of resources, so we've got people who are having to backfill those roles, but it's then the effect that it can have on officers' mental health as well. So that fear of being assaulted, when you've been assaulted, it's not a comfortable thing, and then you could potentially have that fear moving forward. So do you then shy away from conflict and violent situations because you're worried about the after effects of what's going to happen? In the grand scheme of things, my injuries that I sustained are quite minor. I have had colleagues, and a colleague that I used to work with in a previous force, his son was attacked with a crossbow. A police officer was attacked with a crossbow. So, you're looking at very minor injuries, scratches and cuts, to breaking of bones, life-threatening injuries. And for officers to have to wake up every day knowing that that's potentially what they're going to be faced with can have significant effects on their mental health.
Are things getting worse, and is enough action being done by the force within the scope of what you feel it would be able to do to try to stop that? Because 2 incidents a day in Devon and Cornwall, for me, seems a lot.
It is a lot, but on the grand scheme of things, with the incidents that they're going to, it probably isn't. So you've got to remember the job that police officers are doing is not a naturally safe job. We're going to people in crisis, we're dealing with violent situations. So it's not a safe occupation. It's not like going into an office block and kind of sitting down and doing an office job, for instance, although that can have its dangers. We are going into situations that a lot of people would run away from. 2 a day is a lot. We don't want to see officers being injured. That would be best case scenario, but we know that there is that risk. Training, for instance, has been, so the College of Policing are looking or have developed more dynamic training to kind of give officers the best skills in order to deal with that conflict, and that is currently being rolled out across all forces in England and Wales.
I mean, from my reading there, it shouldn't be part of the job, there's a sort of a reluctance that it maybe is. Do we need to change that? Does society need to look at this issue? Because it's something the Police Federation is highlighting on a monthly basis, the number of assaults, and I'm not seeing them go down.
No, and they're not going down. They are going up. Last year, in the last financial year, I think nationally there was just under 46,000 assaults on police officers, which equates to, I think, 126 a day. So 126 police officers a day are getting assaulted, which is too much. Any level of assault is too much. But for the reasons I've obviously mentioned, we can't ever bring that number down to zero because of the type of incidents that we're dealing with. like I said, better training. I know that Devon and Cornwall Police itself are reviewing those figures and looking at how we can address like particular concerns. So they're looking at officers who are repeatedly assaulted, for instance, because, you know, like myself, I was assaulted twice in 3 weeks. So unfortunately, the area that I work in means that I am coming face to face with people close to that crisis point that they're in whatever situation they're in. And the figures that are showing that the majority of officer injuries are towards our younger in-service colleagues, so between 0 and 5 years. Now, the biggest reason for that is because that's where most of our new recruits go into like frontline jobs, so response. They're going to these dynamic situations, so they're like the first point of call. So you would expect that number to be higher in the 0 to 5 years.
Do you feel reassured that, you know, that we are trying to build up a profile, and I guess once you have the information, then you can potentially look at solutions?
Yeah, exactly. If we can identify particular areas, so like I said, the College of Policing, they have been looking, and forces nationally have been looking at the levels of or the numbers of assaults going up, and by creating the dynamic training, they're trying to do something to bring that level down. So you know, you've got a lot of factors, I think personally involved. You know, we've had COVID where people didn't socialise with each other. So some people have never dealt with any means of conflict. You know, you've got people who've been through school and not come into conflict with anybody and don't know how to deal with that. So, you know, we've got police officers who are coming into the job that have never dealt with conflict before they've joined the police. So we're giving them the tools to be able to deal with that conflict. And that's my personal opinion. And better training, ultimately, more officers would help. One of the biggest fears that you can have, or certainly in my personal experience, is, am I going to be assaulted? Well, you look at some areas within our geography, within Devon and Cornwall, officers who are single crewed, who are going to a violent incident on their own, you know, their fear of being assaulted is probably quite high, and that's not something that we're currently measuring, or we haven't got the facilities to measure. But there are focus groups going on to see, you know, what are the factors of that fear of being assaulted, because if you're scared of being assaulted, you're not necessarily going to go in to try and resolve it in a particular way. You're going to be holding back, which could then mean that you're more likely to be assaulted. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, single crewing is a massive fear. You know, you think some parts of Cornwall, your nearest backup could be 45 minutes away, and that's scary to me. I had a situation where, going back to when I had my hair pulled, and I was on the floor with a man who's he grabbed my head and he was banging it on the floor. I could hear in my earpiece, control room trying to get hold of me, and I couldn't get a hand free to be able to answer the radio. And the control room went, "Oh, she's not answering." And it was my sergeant actually said, "We need to get officers there, because if she's not answering, there's a reason why she's not answering." So luckily, by the time my colleagues got there, I'd managed to get control of the individual, and I managed to get him handcuffed, which, looking back on it now, with what I was going through, it was an out-of-body experience. But it's scary being on your own when you're in a fight, essentially. You know, you're fighting for your life.